He said it like it was nothing, like he was telling me what he wanted for dinner. He sat across from me at our own kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten 1,000 meals together, where I had lit birthday candles for him, where I had held his hand the night his father died, and he looked me in the eye and said, "I slept with her, and honestly, if you can't handle that, that's your problem." I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there and felt something inside me go completely still. Not broken. Still. Because in that moment, something shifted in me that would never shift back. He thought my silence meant I was defeated. He had no idea it meant I was finally done protecting him from himself. And what happened the next morning, he is still not over it. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something honestly. If the person who was supposed to love you most looked you in the face and told you they had betrayed you, and then said they would do it again, what would you do? Would you beg? Would you rage? Would you leave that same night? Or would you do what I did, which was take a breath, say nothing, and start making moves they never saw coming? Drop your answer in the comments. Because the way people answer that question says everything. And if you have ever been in a moment where someone tested how much you would take, stay with me. This story is for you. My name is not important. What matters is that I was a good wife. I know everyone says that. I know every woman who has ever been betrayed starts by saying she was a good wife. But I need you to understand what that actually looked like in my life, because the goodness I gave was specific, and it was real, and it was taken in ways that still make my chest tight when I think about it too long. I met Daniel when I was 26. He was funny and he was warm, and he had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 2 years. We got engaged. We got married in my mother's backyard with 50 people and a second-hand dress that I thought was the most beautiful thing I had ever worn. We were not rich. We were not starting with much. But I believed in us. I believed in him specifically, in a way that I now understand was the most dangerous thing I ever did. For the first 4 years of our marriage, I worked full-time as an office administrator at a mid-size insurance company while Daniel worked his way up at a logistics firm. I cooked, I cleaned, I managed the bills, I tracked our savings. I planned our budget on a spreadsheet I updated every single Sunday. I handled our taxes. I handled the car insurance renewals. I handled the lease renewals. Daniel handled his job, and I handled everything else, and I told myself that was just how partnerships worked during a building phase. He was going to make more money. He was working hard. I was the one keeping the foundation solid. I did not resent it. I genuinely did not. Then his career took off. He got a promotion, then another one. By year 6 of our marriage, he was a regional operations manager making nearly 3 times what I made. Things changed, not all at once. Not in any way that I could point to and say, that is the moment. It was slower than that. It was a degree at a time, like a room that gets cold because someone left a window open somewhere you cannot find. He started traveling more for work. He started coming home later. He started taking calls in the garage and stepping outside for texts. I noticed. I noticed every single thing, but I am not someone who accuses without proof. I am not someone who starts fires based on smoke alone. So I watched, and I waited, and I kept the house running, and I kept the spreadsheet updated, and I told myself I was being mature and not paranoid. He hired a new secretary about 8 months before that night at the kitchen table. Her name was Brianna. He mentioned her in passing, the way you mention a coworker. She was good at the job, she was fast, she was organized. He said it like a fact with no temperature. I filed it away and thought nothing of it. The first sign was not dramatic. It was a dry cleaning receipt. I found it in the pocket of a blazer I was taking in. It was from a cleaner 2 towns over, not the one we used. The blazer had been cleaned there the previous Thursday. I knew for a fact that Daniel had told me he was in Cincinnati that Thursday for a client meeting. I stood in the laundry room for a long moment holding that receipt. Then I put it back in the pocket, hung the blazer back up, and said nothing. I started paying attention differently after that. Not obsessively. Calmly. I noticed the small things. The new cologne. The fact that he had started going to the gym after work instead of before. The way his phone was now always face down on every surface. The way he smiled at text messages when he thought I was not looking, and then put his phone away the second he realized I was in room. I want to be clear about something. I did not snoop. I did not go through his phone. I did not follow him. I am telling you this because some people will think I should have confronted him sooner, that I was being passive or afraid. I was not afraid. I was choosing my moment. There is a difference. I have learned in my life that people who are doing wrong need time to build enough rope. I was just waiting for them to finish tying the knot. 6 weeks after the dry cleaning receipt, I came home from work on a Friday to find Daniel sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. He had poured himself a glass of whiskey. He had not poured one for me. He had that look on his face that men get when they have decided that honesty is somehow the same as courage, even when the honesty is really just convenience dressed up in borrowed dignity. He said he needed to tell me something. He said things had gotten complicated at work. He said he and Brianna had become close. And then he said it. He said they had slept together. He said it had happened more than once. He said he was not sure what he wanted yet. And then, and this is the part I still cannot fully process even now, he said, and honestly, I'm not going to promise you it won't happen again, because I don't know where I am right now. And he took a sip of his whiskey, and he waited for me to fall apart. I did not fall apart. I looked at him across that table for a long moment. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I could feel every year of our marriage sitting on my chest like a stone. And I said, very quietly, "Okay, thank you for telling me." And I stood up and I went to the bedroom and I closed the door and I sat on the edge of the bed and I breathed. He knocked an hour later. He seemed confused by my calm. He asked if I wanted to talk. I said I needed some time. He accepted that too easily, which told me everything I needed to know about how much he had already detached. That night, while he slept, I did not cry. I made a list. Not a list of grievances. Not a list of all the things he had done wrong. A list of every financial account we held, every asset we shared, every debt with both our names on it, every insurance policy, every investment account, every property, every car. I wrote it all down by hand in a notebook I kept in my nightstand. Then I went to the kitchen, and I made myself a cup of tea, and I sat at that same kitchen table, and I thought very carefully about what the next 12 months of my life needed to look like. Because I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was not going to beg him to stay. I was not going to perform grief for his benefit. I was not going to give him the dramatic wife reaction that would let him paint himself as the reasonable one in whatever story he was about to tell his friends. I was going to be smarter than that. I was going to be so much smarter than that. The next morning I woke up before him. I made coffee, I made eggs. When he came downstairs looking sheepish and uncertain, I handed him a cup and I sat across from him and I said, "I need you to understand that I heard what you said last night, and I need some time to think clearly before I say anything else. I am not going to pretend nothing happened. I am also not going to fall apart in front of you. Give me 2 weeks." He seemed relieved. Men like Daniel, they are so desperate to avoid the immediate chaos that they will agree to almost anything that gives them breathing room. He said that was fair. He said he appreciated my maturity. He actually said that. He appreciated my maturity. I put that sentence in my memory, and I kept it there like a receipt. During those 2 weeks, I did 3 things that would eventually change everything. The first thing I did was call my sister Karen, who is a paralegal. I did not tell Daniel. I called Karen and I told her everything, and she listened without interrupting, and when I was done she said, "Tell me what you want to walk away with, and we'll work backwards from there." Karen had seen enough family law cases to understand the landscape of what I was dealing with. She was not going to be my lawyer, but she was going to help me understand what questions to ask the right people. She gave me 3 names. I called all 3. I chose one and I made an appointment. The second thing I did was open a personal bank account at a different bank than the one we shared. This was not something I had never had. This was something I had given up 9 years earlier when we combined finances, because that is what you do when you trust someone. You give them access to everything and you stop guarding yourself. I reopened my independence quietly. I began moving a portion of my own paycheck into that account. Not hiding money, not stealing money, just separating what was mine from what was ours. My lawyer later confirmed I had every right to do this and that I had done it correctly. The third thing I did was start collecting documentation, every bank statement from the past 3 years, every tax return, every retirement account statement, every mortgage document, our investment account summaries, his payroll stubs which I had access to through our shared filing system at home. I made copies of everything. I put it all in a folder. I drove it to Karen's house and I left it there. I want to stop here for a second because I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking I was being cold. You are thinking a woman who really loved her husband would have screamed, would have cried, would have thrown him out or begged him to stay. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am built differently. But I think what was actually happening was that I had spent 9 years making myself small enough to fit inside his life, and in the 2 weeks after that kitchen table confession, something very old and very stubborn in me finally stood back up. And once it was standing, it was not going to sit back down for anyone. The 2 weeks ended. Daniel had not moved out. He had been home every night, sleeping in our bed with his back to me, which was fine because I was sleeping with a notepad and a very clear head. On the last night of the 2 weeks, he asked if I was ready to talk. I said yes. We sat in the living room. He had clearly rehearsed something. He told me he had thought about things. He told me Brianna was just a mistake. He told me he wanted to work on the marriage. He did not say he had stopped seeing her. He did not say he was sorry in any way that meant something. He said he wanted to work on it, which is a very specific kind of non-commitment dressed up as responsibility. I said I heard him. I said I needed one thing before I could decide anything. I needed total transparency. I needed to know the extent of what had happened, the full timeline, and whether it was still ongoing. I told him that if he lied to me about one single detail, I would know, and everything would change. He looked at me like he was deciding something. Then he said it had been going on for about 4 months, that it was ongoing but he was prepared to end it, and that he had not spent any household money on it. He said that last part specifically, as though that was a line he was proud he had not crossed. I thanked him for telling me. I said I would think about whether I wanted to try to repair the marriage. I said I needed more time. He gave it to me. 3 days later, I found out he had lied about the money. I had been going through our joint checking account statements carefully, the way I always had, and I found a pattern I had missed before because I had not been looking for it. Over the course of about 5 months, there were cash withdrawals. Small ones, never more than $300 at a time, but consistent, every 10 to 14 days. They added up to just over $4,000. $4,000 in cash, pulled from our joint account during the months his relationship with Brianna had been going on. I am not naive. I know cash is used for a lot of things, but I also know that Daniel did not carry cash. We had talked about it before as a couple about how neither of us really used cash. His card was always on him. These withdrawals were deliberate. They were sized to stay under the threshold that would trigger a bank alert to both of us. He had thought about this. I printed out every statement. I highlighted every withdrawal. I put those pages in the folder at Karen's house. And I said nothing to Daniel. I want you to understand the kind of control that takes. The kind of patience. Every day I sat across from this man at dinner and listened to him talk about his day and kept my face perfectly calm and said the right things at the right times. Every day I was building a case while he was building a fantasy in which I was going to eventually forgive him and things were going to quietly go back to normal. He did not know that normal was already gone. About 3 weeks into this period, something unexpected happened. His mother called me. Daniel's mother, Patricia, had always been a complicated figure in our marriage. She was not unkind to me exactly, but she had never fully accepted me either. I was never quite the right kind of woman for her son, not the right background, not the right family connections, not the right anything. I had spent years trying to earn her warmth and getting back a careful, measured politeness that was its own kind of rejection. I had stopped trying about 2 years earlier and simply maintained a respectful distance. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at my desk at work. She said she needed to talk to me, that she had heard things, and that she was concerned. I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. She said Daniel had called her. He had told her there were some problems in the marriage. He had been, I could tell immediately, selective about what he shared with her. He had given her a version of events in which he was confused and struggling, and I was cold and distant, and possibly the reason things had gone wrong. I listened to her talk for a full 4 minutes, without saying anything. Then I said, very calmly, Patricia, I want to be respectful of you and of this conversation. But I want you to know that I have heard Daniel's version of things too, and when you are ready to hear mine, I am here. Until then, I think it is better if we do not talk about this between us. She was surprised. She was used to me softening, deflecting, apologizing for taking up space. I did not do any of that. I was polite. I was warm. But I was completely firm. She asked me what I meant by Daniel's version. I said I meant that there are always more details than people share, and that when the full picture becomes clear, she should remember that I was not the one who kept anything from her. She called Daniel immediately after hanging up with me. I know because he came home that night looking shaken and asked me what I had said to his mother. I said I had told her we needed space, and that I had been respectful. He looked at me like I was someone he did not recognize. Good, I thought, pay attention. I have been here the whole time. My lawyer's name was Renata. She was small and soft-spoken and had eyes that saw everything at once. I went to see her in her office for our second meeting about 6 weeks after Daniel's confession. I brought the folder. I laid out everything on her desk. The bank statements, the withdrawal pattern, the mortgage documents, the retirement accounts, the investment summaries, the tax returns. She looked at everything quietly, asked a few precise questions, and then she looked at me and said, "You have done the work. Now let's figure out what you want to do with it." I told her I was not ready to file for divorce yet. I told her I wanted to give the marriage one honest chance, but that I needed to know my position before I extended that chance. I needed to know exactly what I was protected against, exactly what was mine, and exactly what leverage I had if things did not change. She told me everything. She was clear and direct, and she did not waste a word. And by the time I walked out of her office, I felt, for the first time in months, like I was standing on ground that would not move under me. The honest chance I gave the marriage lasted about 3 more weeks before it collapsed on its own. Daniel was supposed to end things with Brianna. He had said he would. I had not asked him to prove it because I wanted to see what he did when he thought I was trusting him. What he did was continue seeing her. I did not know this from snooping. I knew this because of a woman named Celeste. Celeste worked at the same company as Daniel, in a different department. She had met me twice at company events, and she had always been friendly in the easy, genuine way that some people just are. She reached out to me through a message on a social platform. She said she was sorry to do it this way. She said she had been going back and forth about whether to say anything. She said she had seen Daniel and Brianna together the previous weekend at a restaurant 2 towns over. They had been holding hands across the table. She said she knew that was not information I might want, but that she thought I deserved to know. I wrote back and thanked her. I asked her if she would be willing to write down what she saw, just a simple statement, date and location, and what she witnessed. I told her I was not going to use it to hurt anyone, just that I needed to understand the full picture. She said yes. She sent me a written account 2 days later. I printed it and I added it to the folder. That night I sat with what I knew. He was still seeing her. He had stood in our living room and offered me a half apology and a vague promise, and then he had gone right back to the same restaurant 2 towns over and held her hand across a table while I was at home managing our finances and hoping I was wrong. I was not wrong, I was never wrong. I had just kept hoping I was. I made a decision that night. I was going to wait 1 more month. Not because I was weak, not because I was hoping something would change. I was waiting because there were 2 financial events happening within the next 30 days that I needed to be positioned for correctly. Our annual investment account distribution was coming, and Daniel's year-end bonus, the largest one he had ever received, was about to be deposited into our joint account. My lawyer had already advised me about what I was entitled to and how the timing worked. I was not going to do anything dishonest. I was going to let both events happen, and then I was going to move forward with the divorce filing, at which point the account balances at the time of filing would be the relevant numbers. I said nothing. I kept the house, I kept the dinners, I kept the spreadsheet, I kept the calm face. The bonus landed, the distribution happened. I made a note of every number. And then, 2 days later, I sat down with Daniel in the living room after dinner, and I told him that I knew he was still seeing Brianna. I told him I knew about the restaurant. I told him I knew about the cash withdrawals. I told him I knew about the dry cleaning receipt from 8 months earlier, the one from the cleaner 2 towns over on the Thursday he said he was in Cincinnati. I told him I knew what the account balances looked like, and I told him I had a lawyer, and I had already had 2 meetings with her, and I was ready to file. He went white. He said, "How did I know about the dry cleaning?" He said that like he had forgotten about everything else I had just said. Like the receipt was the betrayal, and everything else was background noise. I said it did not matter how I knew. I said what mattered was that I had been paying attention the entire time, and that every time he had chosen to lie or continue or escalate, I had been writing it down, calmly, without drama, and that I now had a very complete picture and a very good lawyer, and I was not angry. I was simply done. He tried several things in rapid succession. First, he tried to minimize, said it was not as serious as I was making it. Then he tried to bargain, said he would do therapy, he would end it today, he would do anything. Then he tried to find an angle, asked me if I had thought about what divorce would do to our families, our friends, our finances. Then, when none of those worked, he got quiet in a specific way, the way people get quiet when they are calculating rather than feeling. And then he asked me about the timing of the filing. And I knew that he knew what I knew. He knew I had waited for the bonus. He knew I had waited for the distribution. He could not prove I had done anything wrong because I had not done anything wrong. But he understood, in that moment, that the woman across from him had been playing a very long, very patient game, and that he had misread her from the beginning. He asked me if I still loved him. I thought about that for a real moment. Then I said, "I think I loved the version of you that I believed in. I have not seen that version in a long time, and I am not going to spend the rest of my life waiting for him to come back." He slept in the guest room that night. In the morning, he called his mother. Patricia called me the next morning. Her tone was completely different from the last time. She was not cool, she was not measured. She was upset in a way that surprised me, though maybe it should not have. She said Daniel had told her we were separating. She said she was devastated. She said she had always thought we were solid. And then, in a voice that caught slightly, she said, "He told me what he did. He told me everything." I did not perform shock. I said quietly that I was sorry she was hearing this now. She said, "Why didn't you tell me when I called you? Why did you just say there were more details?" I said, "Because it wasn't my job to tell you about your son's choices. And because I wanted to give him the chance to tell you himself, even if I didn't think he would." There was a long silence on the phone, and then Patricia said something I had never heard her say to me in 11 years. She said, "You have always been more dignified than any of us deserved." I did not know what to do with that, honestly. I thanked her and I got off the phone, and I sat in my car in my work parking lot, and I let myself cry for exactly 6 minutes. Not for Daniel, not for the marriage. I cried because that sentence from a woman who had spent 11 years making me feel like I was not quite enough was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from that family. And it was real, and it landed, and I let it. Then I wiped my face, and I went back inside, and I did my job. The divorce process was not fast. It was not a single dramatic moment. It was months of paperwork and meetings, and the occasional legal skirmish over details that felt important to Daniel, even though the picture was already clear. He had a lawyer too. His lawyer tried several angles. The first was challenging the timing of the filing relative to the bonus. My lawyer was prepared for this. The bonus was part of his regular compensation structure, not a one-time windfall, and we had documentation of that. The argument did not hold. The second angle was attempting to characterize our asset distribution in a way that was favorable to him. We had spent 11 years building a financial foundation together, and while his income had been the larger piece in recent years, my income and my labor had been the foundation the whole structure sat on. We had documentation of that too. Every tax return, every account statement from the beginning. I had been meticulous about our finances for 11 years, and that meticulousness turned out to be one of the most important things I had ever done. During the divorce process, something else happened that I had not fully anticipated. His friends started reaching out. Not to support me, to explain him. Men have this habit, when one of their own does something indefensible, of sending the person he hurt a very careful message that is designed to look like empathy, but is actually a form of damage control. His friend Marcus sent me a message saying Daniel was going through something, and that he hoped I would be open to forgiveness. His friend Todd said that sometimes good people made bad choices. His friend Paul actually had the nerve to suggest that maybe we had both played a role in where things ended up. I did not respond to any of them with anger. I responded to Marcus saying, I wish Daniel well, but that forgiveness was a private process that had nothing to do with whether I stayed married to someone. I responded to Todd saying I agreed that good people made bad choices, and that I was also allowed to have consequences for those choices. I did not respond to Paul at all. Word got back to me, through Karen, that the collective read among Daniel's friends was that I had become cold and unreachable. They preferred the version of me that was soft, the version that could be managed. They did not know what to do with a version of me that had stopped making their discomfort my problem. That was fine. I had stopped caring about being readable to people who had only ever seen me as an accessory to someone else's story. About 4 months into the separation, Brianna broke up with Daniel. I found out from Celeste, who was still occasionally in touch with me, and who had become, quietly, a real source of information. Not because she was gossiping, but because she had seen enough at that company to understand what kind of person Daniel was, and she felt a responsibility to the truth that I respected enormously. Celeste told me that once Daniel's marriage fell apart, and the reality of the situation became concrete, the dynamic between him and Brianna changed. She had never seen him as a full partner. She had seen him as an exciting departure from the ordinary. Once the ordinary was gone, once there was no married man sneaking away to be with her, the excitement dried up. Brianna had moved on to someone else at the company within about 6 weeks of Daniel and me formally separating. I did not feel triumphant about this. I want to be honest about that. I did not feel glad that he was alone. I felt something more complicated and more quiet, which was a kind of distant grief for the man I had thought I was building a life with, combined with a very solid understanding that the man I had actually been building a life with was not that man at all. The person who had sat across from me at that kitchen table and said he would not promise not to do it again was who Daniel had actually been for a long time. I had just not seen it because I had been too busy loving the version I wanted him to be. The final divorce settlement came through about 9 months after that first conversation. We split the assets equitably. I walked away with my portion of the house sale, my portion of the investment accounts, and my retirement account intact. It was not a windfall. It was not revenge money. It was simply what I was entitled to after 11 years of building something, and I took it with a clear conscience because I had earned every penny of it. I found an apartment. It was smaller than the house. It had a view of a parking structure from the kitchen window, which I thought was funny in a way I could not fully explain. I bought a new coffee maker. I unpacked my own things, things that had been part of a shared space for so long that I had forgotten they were actually mine. A lamp I had bought before we were married. A set of dishes I had gotten from my grandmother. Books that had lived on a shared shelf for years, and now lived on a shelf that belonged only to me. I slept better in that apartment than I had in 3 years. Not immediately. The first month was hard. There were nights where the quiet was too loud, and I lay there going through the timeline of the marriage, looking for the moment I could have seen it coming and changed it. I always landed in the same place, which was that there was no single moment. There was never one moment you can point to and say that is where the person you loved decided to stop being the person you loved. It happens the way all slow things happen, in increments too small to see in real time, and by the time you see the full picture, the scene has already shifted. What I stopped doing, gradually, over those first months alone, was apologizing for the timeline of my own understanding. Some people said I should have left sooner. Some people said I should have fought harder to save the marriage. Some people said I was too calm, too calculated, too cold. The same woman who was once described as too soft and too forgiving was now, in the revised version, too strategic and too detached. I noticed that the criticism of me changed shape depending on what I was doing, but it never went away. That is how I knew it was never really about my choices. It was about the discomfort my refusal to collapse had created in people who needed me to be a particular kind of woman. I let that go too. Daniel tried to call me once, about 2 months after the divorce was final. He did not leave a voicemail, just a missed call with his name on the screen. I looked at it for a moment, and then I put my phone down and made dinner. I don't know what he wanted to say. I realized, sitting there eating by myself, that I didn't need to know. Whatever it was, whatever version of closure or guilt or longing or explanation he had lined up, I did not need to be the place he put it. I had been the place he put things for 11 years. That was over now. Karen came over that weekend with wine and a very good cheese, and we sat on my living room floor because I did not yet have enough furniture to fill the space, and we talked for hours. Not about Daniel. About what came next. About what I actually wanted, not what I was building toward for someone else, not what fit into someone else's life plan, but what I actually wanted for myself. I could not fully answer the question yet. But I could feel the shape of it starting to form, which was more than I had been able to say in a very long time. About 5 months after the divorce, I got a promotion. Not a dramatic one, not a life-changing salary jump, but a meaningful step up to a supervisory role that I had been working toward for 2 years, and that had always felt slightly out of reach while I was managing everything at home and giving so much of my energy away. My manager told me that something had shifted in my presence in the past year. She said I seemed clearer and more decisive. She said I had always been competent, but that lately I seemed unafraid. I laughed a little when she said that. I told her I had done some work on that. I also started therapy, something I probably should have done years earlier. My therapist is a practical woman with a very dry sense of humor who does not let me circle the same thought for too long before she catches it and hands it back to me in a different shape. She helped me understand something important about the marriage that I had not fully articulated to myself. The problem had never been that I gave too much. Giving is not the problem. The problem was that I had handed over my self-knowledge along with everything else. I had trusted Daniel's version of our life so completely that I had stopped asking whether it was also my version. I had stopped checking in with what I actually felt and wanted and needed because it was easier to be the person who managed things seamlessly without complaint. I thought that was strength. I now understand it was avoidance in a very good disguise. Understanding that changed something in me at a cellular level. I am not the same person I was when this started. I do not mean that in a dramatic way. I do not walk around with a new persona or a reinvented self. I mean that I make decisions differently now. I check in with myself differently. I say no to things that cost me more than they return. I say yes to things that used to feel too big or too selfish. I take up space more easily. I have opinions more loudly. I sleep with my whole body, instead of one ear, always listening for trouble. Patricia sent me a card about 6 months after the divorce was final. A handwritten card in an envelope with my name on it in her careful, slightly slanted handwriting. She said she hoped I was well. She said she thought about me more than I probably knew. She said she was sorry that she had not been a better mother-in-law to me when she had the chance. She said she was proud of how I had handled things, though she knew she had no real place to say that now. I read the card twice and then I put it in a drawer. I did not call her. I did not write back. Not because I was angry at her, but because I understood that her comfort was not something I was obligated to provide. Her growth, her reckoning with what her son was, and what she had contributed to by never quite accepting me, that was her work to do. I could wish her well with that and still keep my own boundaries about what I offered. I am telling you this story not because I have everything figured out. I am telling you this story because I spent 11 years being the most loyal, most capable, most emotionally available version of myself inside a relationship with someone who did not fully see me. And when the moment finally came, when he sat across from me and said the most disrespectful thing a partner can say, I did not fall apart. I got organized. I got quiet. I got patient. I protected myself legally, financially, and emotionally, and then I walked out with what I had earned and I did not look back. The revenge was not a scene. There was no confrontation that I can package for you as a satisfying explosion. The revenge was a spreadsheet. The revenge was a folder in my sister's house. The revenge was 2 careful meetings with a lawyer before he even suspected what I was doing. The revenge was a missed call I chose not to answer. The revenge was an apartment that felt more like mine after 3 months than that house ever did after 11 years. People ask me sometimes if I regret waiting as long as I did. Waiting to leave. Waiting to act. Waiting through all the signs. And I always think about it genuinely before I answer because I want to be honest. I do not regret it. Not because everything worked out fine. Some of it did not work out fine. Some of it was brutal and lonely and took years off my life. I don't regret it because every step of the way I was doing what I believed was right given what I knew at the time. I was not passive, I was processing. I was not naive, I was generous. And when the generosity ran out, when the evidence was complete, when the folder was full, I moved. And I moved without drama and without cruelty, and without a single word I had to take back later. That is the thing I am most proud of. Not the settlement, not the promotion, not the apartment with the parking structure view that I have actually come to find kind of charming in a gritty city way. I am most proud of the fact that I never became the villain of my own story. I was in pain and I was angry and I was betrayed in the most specific and personal way a person can be betrayed, and I stayed myself the whole time. I stayed clear, I stayed legal, I stayed honest, I never lied. I never manipulated, I never tried to hurt him in the way he hurt me. And that is worth something, that is worth everything actually. He said he would do it again. And the next morning I started making sure that whoever he did it to next, it would not be me. That morning was the beginning of the rest of my life. And that life is mine now, in a way that nothing ever fully was before. I want to ask you something before you go. Not about what you think of Daniel, not about the revenge. I want to ask you about the moment I sat at that table and stayed still while everything broke. Have you ever been in a moment like that, where the person you trusted most said or did something so final that something shifted inside you and never shifted back? Where you knew, all at once, that the road you were on was over and you just had not said it out loud yet? If you have been there, or if you are there right now, I want you to hear this. The calm that comes after that shift is not weakness. It is the beginning of something that belongs entirely to you. Tell me in the comments what you would have done differently, or what you did when your own moment came. I read every single one.